So yeah, welcome to the Infinite webinar on this very sunny but very cold Thursday afternoon. We'll give it a few minutes to let everyone get past the lobby, etc., and then we'll get cracking on a conversation which, to be fair, I'm excited to dive into around where we find ourselves and where we think everything's going in this crazy world that we're in at the moment. I'd like to obviously thank our three speakers. I mean, Tim, you didn't really have much choice in the matter, to be honest. But I'd like to thank Sean and Ian for giving up an hour of their day to give us their thoughts on the state of everything at the moment. But I must confess at the start, before we get started, the title of this webinar was sort of my suggestion, which our marketing team really liked for some reason. But I just do feel I've jumped the gun a little bit now with this new variant. As I say, I came up with that title well in advance of that variant being discovered or publicly announced that it was discovered. So yeah, that's where the name come from. So if anyone's a bit confused that they've missed some form of new vaccine that's cured the new variant, yeah, unfortunately, that isn't the case. Give it one more minute and then we'll get cracking. And I think just to point out as well that the format of this webinar and the format we usually do our webinars, and I know Sean's been on one or two with me previously. We do them in sort of a chat show style format where we ask questions, very open-ended questions, and we just discuss the themes and trends that come out of those questions. But we do record the sessions because, as I say, it's not really for a live studio audience sort of format. It's for now, and it is for then sharing with the communities later on YouTube and via the Zoom links and stuff to all of our networks and all of the people that are potentially unable to join us today. So it's just worth pointing that out. Really, we don't expect sort of 50,000 people to come and watch us. It's for the sort of future audiences really. Right then, it's 4 minutes past, so we might as well get started. I think the first place to start, as always, is to introduce ourselves. So some of you might have seen me do these before. I'm Dan. I'm the co-founder and director of Infinite Talent. We're a specialist supply chain recruitment business based in the UK. We launched ourselves about 3 years ago. And we've seen our sort of team and client base grow over those 3 years from pretty organic activities really around these sort of webinars and trying to be, just thought leaders within our space. And people haven't necessarily come to listen to me tell you what's going on. We partner up with experts in the field and get those guys to tell us what's going on, because they're sort of at the cold face every day. Then we've got Sean. As I say, I did spoil his part. He has done a couple of these with me before, but Sean, if you just like to give us a bit of a synopsis of what you're all about, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So yeah, Sean Lawe, been in some form of operational capacity for the vast majority of my life, either in shop floor manufacturing roles, supply chain, executive, C-suite where applicable. So yeah, lots of experience, as Dan said. Done a couple of these before. They're always interesting, always fun to do. Always great to see which questions are coming and spark some interest from everybody. So really looking forward to it. I'm currently operating manufacturing for a company called Eurocell, which is a building supply company, PLC. So that's been an exciting start to my career path here as well. So looking forward to the session, that's for sure.
Awesome, thanks, Sean. And then our next sort of panelist is Ian, who again has got a wealth of experience in the field, but he's really embarking on something that's really, in my opinion, exciting at the moment. So Ian, what's your sort of situation?
Okay, so yeah, I think it says it on there. So starting a new venture with an Australian company, heading up the UK operations. So I think we've been live about 3 weeks now. So it is, you're right, Dan, it's very exciting. You should see a lot of it going public on all the internet this week, really. So we've seen a sharp increase this week. So interested to see what everybody's got to say about heads and etc. It's just be interesting for me coming up to Christmas.
Yeah, absolutely. And then last but obviously not least, Tim Burrows, who heads up our supply chain and operational recruitment function at Infinite, and Tim, leads the way on a lot of our recruitment projects in this space. So Tim, give us a bit about your background, please, mate.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, I think from my side, I've worked in logistics and operational recruitment for I think about the last 6 or 7 years now. So it's always good to get on a call like this and just sort of talk about the way the market is at the moment, challenges, and from not only an employer's perspective, but also myself as a consultant in the field, it's very valuable. So yeah, I specialize in logistics and supply chain recruitment, and like I say, sort of growing a team within operational recruitment at Infinite. So yeah, that's me.
That's great, mate. That's great. So I think guys, if you don't mind, the most logical place to start on all of this sort of fun times that we find ourselves in at the moment is the current state of play, really, in the logistics and supply chain world. Now, I was having this conversation with someone the other day around, if you listen to BBC News or other mainstream outlets, you get a picture of our world that we, Ian and Sean, you're at the coalface of it, but me and Tim are, probably one layer removed, putting people at the coalface, and you get this impression from mainstream media that there's potentially hundreds of thousands of vacancies available. There's hundreds of thousands of people being made redundant. There's no lorry drivers in the world. There's hardly any petrol, but now there is some more petrol. And all that boils down to supply chain. And in my opinion, a lack of understanding of supply chain and how you guys actually do your jobs and how you operate. And for me, I think it gives me quite a good satisfaction when I'm in the pub, etc. And I give people sort of anecdotes of things we're doing as a business, helping other businesses about, don't necessarily listen to that or that bit's actually true. And I think it'd just be a good place to start, really. Just Sean, if I come over to you first, like what's your perception of where we're currently at?
I think it's probably different in the last 7 days to where I thought if you'd have asked me this question 7 to 10 days ago, the answer would be slightly different. I think you've made a really relevant point there, Dan, about all things lead to supply chains, and I know we're probably biased, this collective, but I've certainly, as I said at my opening gambit, spent the vast majority of my life in some form of supply chain capacity and understanding what supply chain means to people, even when they don't know it themselves. So I think what we've seen recently is really just a spotlight on the world we've inhabited for the best part of our careers. Unfortunately, like most things in life that are not sexy or people want to talk about them, they only become apparent when things are going wrong. I've used this analogy a number of times in my career of, good supply chains they're either a bit like electricity or they're a bit like a football referee. Nobody walks into a room, flicks the light on and goes, thank God the electric's working. We expect it to work. You don't think how it works, why it's working. As soon as it doesn't, you want to know about it. Same with the football referee. No one notices a football referee who's having a good game. Can't ever tell me the name of a football referee. You only know the ones that you get to know because of the wrong reasons. And supply chains tend to be a little bit like that. so there is a sharp focus on. I think what it has done in this period of time is really shine a light on supply chains, unfortunately, that have not really always been fit for purpose, and they've broken quite rapidly, and that I think is a reflection on sometimes a lack of appreciation of supply chain and a lack of investment, a lack of understanding of what's required, talent enhancement, all of that good stuff. I think in one of our previous conversations, Dan, you and I spoke an awful lot about how do we get talented people to see supply chain as a career? How do you see it where it adds value? Well, I think the job advert's just sitting there in front of everybody at the minute. If you want to add value into your world, getting briefed in supply chain is imperative. If I just magnified it a little bit on what's happening at the moment, all that stuff you said, it is pretty real. The availability of people has been a huge challenge in the last 6 months, certainly from the world I inhabit. Overlay that with raw materials, cost inflation, all of that. It's been an incredibly challenging 6 to 9 months, I would say, and really doesn't show any immediate signs of abating. So I think that challenge will go on for some time yet, and it will be about survival of the fittest. I genuinely think that is going to be the landscape in the coming months.
No, that makes sense. And I guess, Ian, to throw the same sort of question over to you. I mean, you're in this world which is absolutely balmy when you think about it, in terms of, the company you work for are picking this moment in time in where we find ourselves to enter a new market. And I think obviously the opportunity, the challenge, and all that stuff that goes with it, I think it'd be great to get your perspective now, because you're almost like an alien from Mars landing into the UK supply chain, in the sense of the company you're working for, you are employee number one in this country. I know you're obviously British and you're in this country for ages, but it'd be great to get your perspective on how you're finding it right now.
I think the biggest thing that I would say is that people are getting choosy. But if you go back a few years, everybody wanted your business. Now I've found in this 3 months, lots of people don't want your business. They want to give the business to somebody else. They're being very picky and very choosy because of the amount of workforce they've got and the amount of costs. So I really struggled, for example, to get a courier. I couldn't believe it, but I really struggled to get a courier. I really struggled to get a premises because there's not many premises around. They're either huge or they're tiny. There's no in between. So I was, although I've been in the business for 30 plus years, I've never really had to start this business and look for, I've always had a courier in place. I've always had a place of business. And I was quite shocked how competitive everything is now, where they can choose if they take you or not. And that certainly wasn't the case 5 or 6 years ago, So that's been the big challenge.
And you've hit on a good point there, because it's something I've got wrote down here to discuss a little bit later, but we might as well pick it up now, because if we take ourselves back to probably when the pandemic started, then we had the little gap, and then we had another lockdown. In our world, and Tim, you can back me up on this, because when we were doing the recruitment for these companies, this is how we sort of found candidates and we were placing candidates. It was natural. You either had companies that were really seeing massive opportunistic growth, and I think, Sean, at the time, the business you were at was a similar thing, or you were seeing absolute calamity and companies falling off the face of the earth, which was fine, because as one company was dying, you could use its staff to feed the growing companies, which was absolutely fine from our perspective. However, now I don't see many falling off the face of the earth, yet I still see companies going sort of through the roof. So for me, that's where that talent gap comes, as Sean alluded to. That's the point. You need companies to die in order for others to grow, because we're only, a single population. But I think back to Ian first. I mean, what are the opportunities that you guys have got to do it right now, in terms of, is this time the time to do it? Well, clearly Tom, who runs Good Pair Days, thinks it is. But what are you thinking now? You said you're 3 weeks live. Do you think this was the right? Is this an opportunistic market, or you mentioned the challenges, but what's the opportunity?
I think the plans all didn't think that COVID would be where we are now. So when they did lots of the planning, and how long it takes to get things over from China, you're talking 12 weeks on the sea. So the plans were all in place, taking into account what they thought the situation would be in the UK. So it is a struggle now because we're still in a pandemic, and when they put their plans in place, that they honestly believed that it would be over or virtually over and less affecting us now. So we're still feeling that at the moment. Obviously, going live around a Black Friday in a shared facility is not the best thing to do either. But it's been challenging, and it will continue to be challenging. But I don't know when the right time would have been for them, Dan, to be honest. It's a finger in the air. They could have left it till the new year, but would they have missed the Christmas uptake? So I think they've took lots of things into account at the time. And
I think that's a great point. That's a great point, because when we had Brexit and everything, roll that far back, I think everyone had that mindset of, oh, we'll wait. Yeah. And then actually, I think the pandemic has brought people into focus is, if you carry on waiting, you'll never do it. So when is the right time? I think that's a great point that you've made there around that. I think that's, that's something that I think the pandemic has actually helped everyone with. If you're going to make a decision, just do it, sort of thing. But yeah, no, that's it's a very good point. Sean, from your perspective, obviously, very much, in an established PLC type company, what's the opportunity for you guys right now? Is it the same as a startup, or is it, or the challenges outweigh the opportunity?
I think in an established business, the challenges can be similar, but there is obviously some additional ones, and then some that are not got the same problems that Ian would face into, because you've got established ways of working, you've got a customer base, and all the things that the challenge startups or challenge new business we're fortunate to not have. However, the counter to that is you're fighting to retain business. A bit, just picking up on Ian's point of whatever you want to call it, choosiness or willingness to work with people. People have got a lot more discerning than they used to be. And even, Ian spoke a little bit there about couriers as an example. I'd use part of your world, Dan. I know you're not in the world of temp labour, for example, but for years the UK as an operational output has been hooked on the drug of temp labour, allowing somewhere between, depending on your business, but somewhere between 25 to 10% of your workforce really being in that temp labour pool, where you turn the tap on and off accordingly, which gave you a degree of flexibility, allowed you to manage your cost base accordingly, allowed you to respond to ups and downs as that's over. But it's certainly over for now. I don't know if it'll ever come back. None of us can see the future. But what I can say is the adaptation to that world, as with most things when you're acting it, is slower than the world allows it to be. Yeah. What do I mean by that? Well, what I'm landing is that whilst we're all working out what does that mean in a different way of working, the world's carrying on. So our ability as a bigger, larger organization to react quickly, respond, change our tactic is sometimes hindered by the fact that you're an established organization and you've got to go through the right and proper process and procedure to adapt to that. So there's always going to be a lag of things like that. But yeah, I think just about, I think all of us on the call, myself, I speak more about myself than anybody else, just about all young enough, to not have to have lived with hyperinflation activity. Yeah, I think, if I did, and just say none of us are fortune tellers, but if I did take a step into the immediate future, I don't think any of us yet are prepared for the cost rises that are on the way. You know, I openly people speaking now about wage inflation of 6, 7, 8%, you know, as a norm. You know, again, I can remember really recently, 3% was a hell of a leap for people to. So coping with all of that as a well-established way is how do you flex accordingly, and with the speed that you need to do so.
No, that makes sense, and I think, Tim, that brings me down to you really, in the sense of what are you seeing? Because obviously you work with, you know, this is two snapshots of Ian in the startup, Sean in the PLC. You work with a whole host of clients across the Infinite business. Are you seeing people coming to yourself to do recruitment, so to plug gaps, to get people? Is that because they're growing and it's an opportunity-based hire, or is it a challenge because, you know, they're losing people, or there's just not the people there to do it? What's the market feel around that situation?
I think there's a good mixture, to be fair. There seems to be, you know, similar to obviously where Ian is with Good Pair Days. I think there seems to be a good number of people like that are seeing the opportunity for a gap in the market and want to be the sort of first that run with that. So there are, you know, some really exciting sort of startup businesses, which are of course creating a lot of sort of brand new vacancies that they've never recruited before. But then there does seem to be a lot of, I think candidates have too much choice. So, a lot of choice because it's so competitive out there. So, you know, I think candidates will move just for reasons that you wouldn't even think of. Like I was with, you know, with a food manufacturer business yesterday, and they were saying that, you know, if a warehouse opens up on their estate that's not chilled, and the colleagues don't have to work in a freezing cold environment all day for 8 hours a day, they'll move for the same money. So there's just too much choice. So I think that's what's causing a lot of vacancies in that particular company. You know, there's sort of 5 managerial roles that they're, you know, really struggling to fill, that they have been through their own sort of channels, and that's where obviously we come in. But yeah, I think there's probably 2 points from my side. I think, you know, there is obviously, like I say, some good sort of startup businesses, quite exciting, you know, new businesses that are new to the market, and then, like I say, that then causes a bit of a backlog for the businesses that might have been there for years, but it just means that those candidates have since moved on and gone for something a little bit different, and you know, possibly a little bit more of a comfortable role for them in terms of, like I said, they're not in a site that's freezing cold. And it's a similar story for drivers as well, I think, in terms of, I know we don't do driver recruitment, but when I'm speaking to transport managers, they're saying that they're struggling to retain drivers because a role might come up that's, you know, maybe not a multi-drop role that's easier for them because they just need to drive to one location. So I think it's just so competitive out there, and I think obviously there's just not the new candidates coming through where you know, you're not told at school to go and get a career in logistics, are you? So it's just that, back to that story where there's other the new candidates coming through from a, you know, like an associate junior level, trying to work their way through.
Yeah, and there's 2 points you touched on there, and the first one is that consumer choice seems to be trickling down now into your work life and your workforce. You know, you can have, there's Netflix, there's Prime Video, there's Sky. You know, there's so many ways you can get your media, which we've always come to learn with and live with now. You know, there used to just be Sky and then Virgin or cable, but now there's loads. And that's just dribbling through into the workforce, isn't it, now as well? Like, you know, there are lots of different options, and like you say, you can be selective. Well, I don't really fancy working in a cold warehouse, I'll work in a warm one, sort of thing. And that's that. And but the solution to that, which I feel, I said this to someone yesterday, and Sean, we definitely touched on this in our events when you came to Birmingham, is how do people get into logistics and supply chain? In my eyes, there's 2 ways. And for me, the middle way doesn't exist. So you either drop out of everything and become a warehouse operative and work your way up, or you go on a grad scheme, you do a university degree and then land a grad scheme at one of your big 3PLs, right? That's in my eyes, the main 2 ways you do it, right? Where's the normal way of leaving school with some education and getting a maybe not maybe a first line, you know, not you know, sort of a picker job, but the next job? Where's the entry level jobs in logistics? And I think that's the gap. And I genuinely think that the reason to root is that, you know, there's not many logistics degrees. There's definitely no logistics and supply chain courses taught at school, which is insane. But for me, Tim, you've hit the nail on the head with the two issues really, because the one is not supported by the other, if that makes sense. You've got all this pickiness and choosiness at what job you want to do, which is great if you've got a steady stream of people coming into the industry, but we haven't, I don't think. And so that's an interesting point you make. And I think the current state of the market, I think again is very simplified in a mainstream media level. But I think as we come up to Christmas now and into where we are now, I mean, Ian said you've launched the business on Black Friday, which is interesting. And Sean, I guess a question for you as well is how does your peak work in comparison to, because obviously your business, as you said, building supplies and all that sort of stuff. If I was guessing, I'd imagine it might be at a different time to, say, someone that's selling wine, for example. But yeah, I mean, how is Christmas? How is now this month of December, January? How is that going to look on a very sort of micro level for both businesses, really, Sean? How's yours going to look? Yeah,
and you're right, Dan. Yeah, it's definitely a different profile than wine, which tends to be a peaks on a Friday night, but maybe that's just my household, and that's probably where the demand comes from. Yeah, I mean, December will definitely see us downturn our demand and supply, because again, everybody's familiar, even at arm's length, of the kind of world that we're inhabiting. Building supplies, and whether it's people doing their own homes, whether it's large house building developments, whether it's projects of building, etc. So it will definitely downturn, but it's all about getting ready for the next year to come. So how do we make sure that we hit the ground running? How do we make sure our stocks are available, that when the upsurge comes, that we've got a good foresight and a plan? And that drives out the challenge, because as we keep saying, we're probably now entering it will be 2 years, I think, in March, that the first lockdown was imposed.
Yeah,
we've had 2 years of this completely unpredictable landscape of trying to second guess what's going to happen. And actually, it isn't people being disingenuous, Machiavellian. They're not holding anything back. They're not trying to trip you up. Genuinely, just people don't know. They don't know what the next 3 months is going to look like, let alone what the year ahead looks like. So yes, the peaks and troughs, probably even 3 years ago, would have probably been reasonably predictable. There would have been something that everybody could have said, yeah, it's going to be there or thereabouts, and hopefully we'll win some market share, some business, and these people are in play. At the minute, it's challenging to try and work out where the peaks go.
Yeah.
Seasonality plays a part, but the rest of it will depend on the economy, people's pounds in their pockets. Are they going to spend more on? They continue to spend more on their houses, or are they going to spend on their own?
For you, Sean, I remember you saying to me before, and you say about predicting peaks and troughs, etc., etc. I remember you said to me before, I think it was in your previous roles, that actually the lockdown triggered a peak like you'd never seen before, and it was, it didn't really matter whether that was a summer lockdown or winter lockdown or whatever it was. The lockdown sort of triggered something for you which was unprecedented, really.
Exactly, and that's all to do with consumerism and people who've got money to spend. And people, if you've got a surplus of your income, if you're lucky enough to have surplus, people don't hoard it away. They just turn their attention elsewhere. They just spend it on different things. And what we found during the lockdowns, as is quite well documented, that whether it was in some form of home-related situation, there was a lot of activity, and therefore the peaks of that drove up. We do products like garden rooms and things like that, for example, where have become attractive now because you've got work from home principles. Not everybody's got a bedroom they can convert, but they might have a big garden or a garden where they can put a space and So all of that we've hit an absolute fast forward button on evolving our ways of working, what we spend our money on, why, where, when. And humans adapt really quickly. It's whether business can adapt to the human change, and those that do really well, and those that don't, as you talked about before, tend to fall off a cliff.
Yeah. And I suppose if you throw that back over to Ian in terms of your world, I think, well, I imagine that you're, I was reading somewhere, I think a similar type of service, but in gin rather than wine. I think they saw like a 400% growth or something in the lockdown period, because obviously hospitality venues were closed and things like that. So I guess we're not there yet, and we're coming into Christmas and all that. So how's that playing into your thoughts and into your strategies?
Well, funnily enough, in Australia, the business grew 250% this year because of lockdown, which has given them the money to invest into the UK, basically. But
oh, right. So that's born out of the opportunity is born out of the actual pandemic itself. Then the lockdown itself. That's very interesting.
Well, in Australia as well, the lockdown was a proper lockdown, not like ours, and I don't know if you've been to Australia, but you can't go to a supermarket or a local shop and buy wine. You have to have a liquor license, so it's a separate shop. So they've grown massively, and maybe that's what was on the mind to get into the UK as soon as possible, because we're still in this. So, but if you talk about before, so I worked for Ted Baker before this, so it is about changing your business, because at the start of the pandemic, the shops closed and e-com went crazy. So it was about changing what we did at Ted as well, so instead of 80% of it going to stores, virtually 100% was going e-commerce. So it was a massive change in direction.
And how did you handle something like that? Because to the untrained person, that just sounds like a flick of a switch, and we'll send a conveyor that way instead of that way. But obviously, me, Tim, Sean, obviously you work in this environment. Me and Tim have walked around, numerous distribution centres. Yeah. That must have taken some big effort. And as Sean alluded to earlier, it's about how quickly you can do that relative to the pace of it's happening in the environment.
Yeah, I mean, we found it quite easily here to swap over because a pick's a pick. But the difference was, if you're picking for a store, you'd pick 100 items. If you're picking for an individual, you're probably picking a maximum of 2 or 3. But the issue we had was the consumables, because instead of using, let's use silly figures, but 1,000 boxes for e-com this week, all of a sudden we're using 10,000 boxes for e-com, and it was about, during the pandemic, getting that supply into us, and that was the biggest risk we had, really.
Yeah, and then obviously finding ourselves where we are now in December, and if you're anything like me, you're going to leave your shopping last minute and you'll buy something and it probably won't fit, or it's the wrong colour or something like that, especially in the Ted Baker world. And not sure you could probably send the wine back after you've drunk half a bottle, but we'll see about that. But in Ted, I mean, when that shift came, did you see a massive spike in the returns as well, that people were just buying to almost for something to do, really? Because in lockdown, I mean, there's not much to do. I mean, how did that impact you guys as well?
Well, it actually created a change in Ted. So it used to be free returns.
Okay.
And then they changed it. They completely turned it around. So it was free delivery, and then you had to pay for your returns. So we tried to combat the fact that people were ordering 6 dresses on the compromise that they were going to keep 1. So because the cost of returns is huge. It is just basically a cost to the business. You have to get it back to virgin stock. So because you're going to be sending it out somewhere else. So it is just a cost. So anything you can put in place to reduce the amount of returns. I don't know the exact figures, but I think it was between 12 and 14% pre-pandemic, and it shot up to above 30% in the pandemic returns.
Oh. Right, okay.
Hence why they changed what they did.
Right, it makes sense. There's something has to be done, doesn't it? I mean, especially with Ted's not really fast fashion, but in the fast fashion world, the margins aren't necessarily massive anyway to start with. So if you're taking this percentage out for returns and things, you have to get it quite right. Otherwise, you could get some disasters, I imagine, with the business model. I mean, Tim, you're probably going to be a really good person to look at this specific sort of moment in time around peak, because you're dealing with, as I say, a number of different customers. I mean, what are you seeing compared? You've been in this industry 4 or 5 years now, doing logistics specifically, operation. How
Sure.
does this year compare with last year when we were all in pretty much lockdown? How do these two compare, and then to the previous years? What are the differences?
Yeah, I mean, there is a mixture. There's some clients that are saying we're like you say, through lockdown, people have been, but it's particularly like the e-commerce businesses. They're saying they've already been experiencing a peak for so long. It's almost like we're so prepared. But then there's other businesses that are predicting volumes that obviously are much different than normal, because like I say, people are just particularly if they're more e-commerce focused. And then in that case, they're having to grow, fixed term contract team leader roles, shift manager roles, like site-based roles, just to get them through that. So yeah, it's definitely very different to any other peak that I've sort of worked through, to be fair.
It's an interesting point you make as well, that actually, again, the pandemic is having, I'm going to use the word very lightly, having some positive impacts on things.
Yeah.
So obviously Ian said about the reason Good Pair Days are in the UK is potentially on the back of the pandemic in Australia and that boost in profits. And you've just made a good point there that a lot of people for peak this year actually isn't the all or nothing principle as we've seen in previous years. It's more because there's still this after effect of everyone buying online, even in summer months when normal people would be out browsing Bicester Village and all these other nice places, it seems like actually that's allowed them maybe not to have as many challenges at peak as they'd usually have, staffing aside, because obviously we've already touched on getting people is difficult regardless of the time of the year. So that's a very interesting point. And I think it kind of segues me nicely into the exciting bit of this webinar for me is the what does the future hold section, because when I came up with the title, as I say, post-pandemic peak, I had an idea in my head about where this conversation was going to go and what we were going to talk about. And then about a week and a half ago, they threw, there's this new variant that's been thrown out there that's, more readily transferable than all the other variants, more mutated than any of the other variants. And it screams, issue all over it, really. So I think the best place to start is, yes, what do we think the future is going to look like? But with an asterisk next to it based on if and when, or, this variant does actually, affect us or not affect us, really. So I guess, Sean, I'm sure you've done lots of planning and you're all ready for the new year. And again, as I say, this asterisk next to it around this variant. I mean, what's your thoughts on the future? Maybe just 2022, and that's probably as far as we can look, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer to that, Dan, is, if I take it high level for a little while, is we've got to learn to do things differently as a group of people, as a nation, as a people. There's so many things that have become normalized in our life. We haven't even really realized it. Whether that's cheap imports, whether that's routes to market that are quick, easy, and almost invisible, whether that's, as we've touched on, access to freely available labor that doesn't really, because as those things start to become, certainly I think in the short term, they may, it may change again, who can say, but in that very immediacy, we've got to learn to do things differently and be acceptant of doing things differently. There's got to be, I think, a lot more honest conversations around things. Like I said, it's almost been done by us to us. If you look at what we're used to paying for things comparatively to what we would have been paying for things even 10 years ago, they went on this very steep downward decline, and we just got this consumerism came about. Ian just mentioned there about Ted, ordering 6 dresses and ordering it. We're just used to that being a normal. It's not real anymore, and I certainly don't think it's going to be real for 12 months. And as I say, that world of existence and supply chain, as we opened up with, really weaves its way through all of that and affects every single thing that everybody does. Everything is supply chain dependent. As I say, just people don't necessarily know it. So that the next 12 months, I think it's a different concept. I think people have just got to open up the dialogue a lot more. More things like this would be valuable around lots of areas and lots of conversations about what that world looks like. So I think it's going to be fragmented, unpredictable still. Throughout history, it's been the survival of the fittest. Business has got to make itself fit for purpose. It's got to get the right talent at the table. It's got to have not get scared, I suppose, it would be my call out, because change happens all the time. Adaptability is going to be a definite requirement going forward. But yeah, it remains an unpredictable future. I think we probably all went into that first lockdown thinking, let's be over soon. 6 weeks at the most, we'll be out of this, sun shining, what's to complain about? Let's all just have a 6 weeks sort of sabbatical, reset, and then we'll just carry on again. Everything will be back to normal. This we have to, the sooner we accept that the world has changed and we now need to do a whole host of things differently, the better off we're going to be.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, you touched on a great point there. And I was thinking this, why we do these sort of things. Why do we do webinars? Why do we do anything like this, really? Why don't we just consume blogs and mainstream media? But I think it's important to remain quite close to the it doesn't have to be scientific, just to the antidotes of the industry, and as close to the tools and the coalface as you can possibly be when you both, you two are both in senior roles, because like you say, the cost of things, the cost of, I don't know, I haven't bought a boiler for a year or 2 years, 3 years. That could now be 3 times as much as I last paid for a boiler, but I don't know because I haven't had to buy one. And I think sometimes, we see it in our world that senior leadership are that far removed from the actual world that's going on, because maybe they don't get involved with things like this. Maybe that this, that this is not their thing, but we see it that they're so far removed. It actually gives them quite a fright when you explain this. There are no, you can't just click your fingers and get an FTC because there's no one sitting around. Believe the BBC News might have you believing there's loads of people sitting around, the great redundancy or whatever it was called. It's just not the case. And I think these sort of things, as you touched on, Sean, these webinars, they allow the people that are actually doing it and experiencing the opportunities, experiencing the challenges, to tell people what it's really like out there in the real wide world. And I think you're 100% right. But there was something you touched on earlier, actually, that I wanted to bring back to you, Sean. You mentioned the word bubble as if we're in like a bit of a, you've had it through economics through history. There's been bubbles of all sorts. You mentioned that word bubble, and I genuinely think we are in a bit of a bubble. I think things are, because everyone's scrapping to do what they need to do. Do you feel, and I guess if you knew this, you'd be a billionaire, but when do you think this bubble might burst, and how much longevity do you think this crazy world we're in at the moment has got to go in terms of from a bubble perspective?
Great, thanks, Dan, for that. As you say, if I knew the answer to that, I would be nearly as rich as you.
No, dear.
But I think it's here for a while. I don't think I can put a time frame on it. I think, as I say, if we, throughout history, you look at, you can compartmentalize blocks of history, and I speak quite openly about, certainly as a Western society, let's call it that, but I think really highlighted within the UK, we've been hooked on this drug of cheap imported goods, fit for purpose, doing, I grew up in an era where if you were a kid and you had a toy made in China, it was an inferior product. You didn't want it. It was something that, I guarantee those of you with small kids, there won't be a toy in your house that isn't made from China, because we got used to that flow of goods, that flow. So unhooking us from those kind of dependencies is going to take a long time. Like I say, whether that's for 12 months, whether that's for the next 5 years, is really hard to say at this stage. But the immediacy is forcing us to do things differently, because that that world is changing as we're going through, probably accelerated by the pandemic, I would say. I think it was always going on an inevitable curve, but it's been accelerated for sure. So I don't know when the bubble will burst down. I don't know when we're going to get into a different world. I don't know. I think the challenge is people are still in the world of this is just a blip, and very soon we're going to go back to where we were 2 years ago. I don't think that's the case. I think it's changed already. Sometimes you don't know things have changed for a while because they're not right smack bang in front of you. It's only afterwards. I think, again, I've used this before, is I'm sure people living through the Industrial Revolution didn't wake up every day thinking, we're in the middle of an Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
It's only afterwards you look back and go, that period of time was the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah. Well, you don't realise inflation.
We don't know what we're in the middle of. I can just say we're in the middle of a move away from what probably the last 20 years has looked like.
Agreed. Yeah.
Where we land is intriguing for all of us.
No, absolutely. We've had a question come through on the Q&A function, but before we just answer that question, because that does actually really segue me nicely into the last part of our webinar. But before we get to that, Ian, same question to you really about the predictions for the future. Obviously, again, you're in a different spot in your career with your business to Sean, but how do you think the future looks for next year, really?
Yeah, I think if I just speak about the business that I'm controlling in the UK, it looks rosy. And the reason for that is it's very new, it's very fresh to the market, and it's e-commerce only. So we can keep the cost down to a certain degree. Because touching on what Sean says, and I actually agree, I don't think a lot of the impact has hit business yet. So when we talk about fuel, when we talk about the economy, interest rates have been so low for so long, that's not going to last. Fuel is 40p a litre more than it was at the start of the pandemic. That brings cost to everything. And I don't think it's hit everywhere yet. I think it's going to be next year that hits. And I think you touched on it, Dan, where you said sometimes in times like this, the big ones get bigger and the smaller ones go under. And I honestly believe that's what will happen. And that's what happens in a crisis. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of it still to be hit, but I'm in a very lucky position that it's an e-commerce, online, keeping costs down. I'm working in a shared facility where I'm sharing resource, I'm sharing cost. So I think for my business, it looks healthy. But I would say that after 3 weeks going live, I'd be worried today and said it didn't. So
that's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
And I think it's all about planning, isn't it? And it's amazing, really. So I know Sean's business, and I'm pretty certain they're still going to keep building houses, and there's still going to be estates popping up here, there, and everywhere. So there's going to be needs that we're always going to need, But if you talk about the pandemic, what was the biggest shock for me in the pandemic? I couldn't get my hair cut. You always need your hair cutting. So these things that's always going to be needed. I'm sure Sean's will be fine because we'll always build. We're going to have to. So, and mine, I think I'll be all right because we always need a drink.
Yeah, and I think yours is a very interesting model, because I think with new variants and all that sort of stuff that comes out, I think there's a certain, there'll be a certain demographic within our population. My dad is actually, an at-risk person within this, and I think that demographic in the population might actually lean on services like Good Pay Days a lot more than previously, because my dad, who's again high risk, he might think twice about going to the pub. He might do it once a month now instead of every week or whatever. But to supplement his enjoyment and his social life, he might sign up to a Good Pay Days type thing, or do you know what I mean? So I think it, as you've both sort of said, and Sean, you emphasise the point around that changing of behaviour and changing of what people do. I think there are business opportunities that crop up out of that, and again, I think it's just being able to adapt to those, see those opportunities for what they are, and adapt to those, accordingly. And it's so hard to plan, isn't it? You can't say really for certain what December 2022 is going to look like and what we're going to do, in the middle of that, really, because we just don't know. And again, it segues me nicely onto the question that we had. And Tim, this is probably for you to come on to after the guys have answered this question. But the question was, has the pandemic presented any new roles to your business that didn't exist before the pandemic? Now, obviously, Ian, you've answered that pretty much with aplomb to start with, because your whole business unit really didn't exist before the pandemic. So that's an interesting one for you to go first on, really, to talk about what jobs have been created from your situation, really.
Yeah, well, I think the whole business has been created because of the pandemic. So would it have come to the UK? Possibly, but it certainly it speeded up the process because, as I said, in Australia, the pandemic's caused such a huge growth because that was the way that they interacted through drink. Anybody who's not been on the website, I know it's not an advertising thing, this, but should have a look at the website and see about it. And
I'm still waiting for my subscription as part of your recruitment.
Well, there's a brand new one out now, the welcome, where you get £50 worth of free gifts. So I'll send it you. But what's really good about it is they do lots of things online. So they involve people, they do wine tasting online, they have groups. So they really took the online business to another level in Australia, and that's what they're going to try and do here. So I think they thought it through. I think they've been very lucky. While the rest of us have been unlucky with the pandemic, they've took hold of a situation and thought, how can we grow it? And they've done it. They've managed to do it. I think they're very clever people. You've dealt with Tom, the owner. So I think he knows what he's doing.
Absolutely. And so, and how many jobs? I know you're in a shared facility at the moment because obviously you needed to get it going. But what's the forecast for 2022? How many jobs will Good Pay Days create in the UK for people in 2022?
Well, we're suggesting. So at the minute, I've just set one manager on at the moment, which. And it's, as you know, well, you maybe don't know, but it's a subscription basis. So every time somebody signs up, we know, so we can see the future growth. So we're estimating this time next year to have around 50 staff.
Okay,
and probably double the workspace. So at the minute, I'm renting 7,500 square feet and 200 pallet locations. So we're looking at doubling that in a year.
Nice. So yeah, to answer the person's question that asked that, then so up to 50 jobs that the pandemic has created really for Good Pay Days. And then Sean, same question to you really. What, if any, has the pandemic created any new roles with Eurocell?
The short answer is yes, Dan. We've definitely expanded the workforce and employed more people. I'm not sure who asked the question, so I can't ask them directly. I was interested whether they actually meant, rather than in volume terms, but has there actually been any new types of roles created?
Okay, maybe.
Is it? Do we now need a different type of role? I'm not sure which way that question went, so I'll try and answer both. In terms of volume of jobs, absolutely, we've definitely increased our workforce because we're busier. I think the difference has been I think everybody would say this, but we're definitely demanding of the talent. We want the right people for the right role, because we want great people doing great jobs. So we've definitely done that, and growth is still on the agenda. In terms of if it's the other part of the question, which I'm trying to interpret, which is there something new there? I'd say not yet, but again, that brings me back to where I think everything always lags behind the pace of change. Interestingly, I was having a conversation only this morning with our head of manufacturing about the evolution of data and data management. You went back, I don't know what the point in time is, 15 years ago, and said to somebody, "Can I be a data manager, please?" They'd have looked at you like you can't spell the word date. That's what they would say. So have we yet worked out what new roles need to be to cope with working and living in a pandemic related environment? I don't think so. And I think it's going to take us some time yet to interpret that.
No, mate, that makes sense. And I guess, Tim, This one's
Yeah.
again. I bet you're probably the best person to answer this question because, as I say, you see like a pan industry perspective.
Sure.
Really, no pun intended there. Around what what sort of roles. Firstly, are there lots of new roles being created because of the pandemic? And secondly, are there any sort of, like, to Sean's point, if the person means this, are there any brand new roles? I mean, I know me and you've sat on a couple of calls with a couple of clients where they've discussed this type of thing, but what's your insight into that question?
Yeah, there's a few points I'd add, really. I think, I think there's been lots of opportunities being created for, if you think about industries that the pandemic's actually created from not scratch, but definitely sort of increased the volume in these type of products. But if you look at, like the Clipper Logistics PPE contract, for example, I mean, we were right at the beginning of the pandemic recruiting hundreds of managers for a new contract that they'd won that was, delivering PPE to the NHS, which is obviously a very important contract. And then, there's a couple of guys that I know more so probably in the manufacturing field that have joined businesses that are creating hand sanitizer, for example. So there's absolutely a lot of industries really that have, or products, for example, which of course needs a supply chain. So there's opportunities like that the pandemic have created. And what another note I'd say, and I've mentioned this to a few people, is since the pandemic, I mean, obviously since I've been in logistics recruitment, I have recruited for e-commerce businesses the role of a carrier manager. Who would choose like the sort of final mile businesses within logistics. But I think since the pandemic, I've never known so many roles such as a carrier manager or head of sort of contract management or something like that, where there'd be somebody working from an e-commerce business or a retail business that would basically be managing those contracts. And I think that role's just become a much more of a valued role in a lot of retail businesses. And I think it's a different breed of carrier managers now, a different background where there's just so much more they can add. And the salary for that role has just gone up so much, I think, since, pre-pandemic.
No, I agree. And the amount of, I think we had a call the other week with another client where, they're employing people now to track their supply chain. So within the supply chain, almost like a hybrid planner role where you're tracking and tracing and chasing up on where your stock is at any given point in the supply chain and all that sort of stuff, which I guess before the supply chain crisis, as BBC like to put it, that didn't exist. But I think that's a reaction to the publicity around it. So, if they've got these people that should know at any given point where a certain container is or where a certain bit of stock is in that supply chain, I think that then they can feed back to their customers and give, as Sean said, that data, that real-time data, and can be fed back out to customers through platforms, e-commerce platforms, whatever the platform might be. Here's your order, track your order, all that sort of thing. I think it's about in that instance is managing your audience, isn't it, and communicating with people. And if you tell someone it's going to be delivered on a Friday and it's not delivered on a Friday, you've got a problem, sort of thing. Whereas if you tell them it's a Monday, people are usually happy with a Monday as long as you've told them, as long as it happens when it happens, sort of thing. And that's for me what I would be like as a consumer anyway. So that makes sense. And then Tim, just where we're at the moment, obviously, the recruitment scene, we've recruited for Sean, we've recruited Ian into there. We're gonna do some work with these guys next year. And from your opinion, Tim, what's the problem at the moment? Because everyone is trying to recruit, and it is tough. It's tough for us who, we're professional recruiters essentially, and it's tough for us. So what can companies do to make sure they're ahead of their competition from a supply chain recruitment perspective?
I think possibly to look at, if you look at some of the businesses that do it well, like the larger sort of 3PLs and things like that, I think there's that training, because any business would like somebody from that background with that training. So I think there just needs to be a massive push on, junior roles with that sort of, maybe not necessarily graduate programs, but apprenticeships, and let's advertise that into schools and colleges.
Well, Tim, Sorry to interrupt you, but we've literally had a question. I know we're at 1 o'clock now, so we will wrap up very shortly because I know the guys have got busy days to go with. But and this is a whole new webinar. And in fact, Sean, I know this will be something you'll be dead keen to get involved in because it links back to what we had that chat that night up in Birmingham. The question is, why is the industry not appealing to younger talent? Is there anything we could do to help younger people step into supply chain roles and logistics? And Tim, I think apprenticeships is one thing there, but that is a whole. For me, that's a whole thing. And I know, Sean, you're very passionate about that in terms of that needs to be tackled, doesn't it? That is a, and the government should see this now with all that media attention on supply chain. The government should be seeing this sort of stuff and maybe it does take an industry body or whatever to push that to the government. But yeah, Tim, as I say, that question's come in and I think you were going down the right path there with a potential solution.
Yeah, 100%. I think if it was advertised in a school maybe even as a subject in a school, me for one, I'd never really understood like supply chain and logistics or even knew it was a career until I started working in recruitment and then moved markets into logistics and supply chain. I for one would be interested in it. I think it's a very interesting industry, and it's something that can get a lot of people. You can quite easily become quite passionate about it and making change, and it's a really credible career, isn't it, where you can take it? So I think absolutely it should be maybe pushed as a subject or definitely something people should be aware of from a young age, I think.
And it's I think people say it's not that sexy, it's all this sort of stuff, but I kind of disagree, because the stuff that goes, you can pick your industry, right? You don't have to, a person might be interested in a career potentially in plumbing, plastering, whatever. Why not get a logistics career in a manufacturing or a building company like Sean works for, or if you're another type of individual that likes fashion or e-commerce, fashion or drink or alcohol or anything like that. There is a logistics career to be found in those companies as well. So it's not as if you're closing off the market to any type of person really, because whatever you're interested in, there's probably a company that moves those sort of products around or that sort of thing. And from what me and Tim see, logistics, it pays relatively, it's the salaries on offer compared to, a management accountant or a financial accountant. Logistics can easily give you that sort of money, quite easily. It's not like it's an underpaid industry. I think, again, another topic to come on in another time probably. I think I've seen as minimum wage goes up, I think the team leader, shift manager level of logistics is struggling because I don't think their wages go up in line with minimum wage rise, and it makes those roles almost like, what's the point in doing them? Because I've got to manage 100 people and get paid 20p an hour more. What's the point, sort of thing? But I think as an overarching industry, I think that there are many selling points. It's just not sold. And yeah, Sean, I'll let you have the last word on this one because I know it's something you're really passionate about.
Well, definitely, Dan. I mean, as you say, I think that's a whole new webinar, all of its own. It's deserving of at least an hour, if not multiple hours of everybody's time. My views on this. I've shared them with you extensively over the time we've known each other. God, where'd you start? There's so many gaps in this. We don't have a governing body. We don't have an education plan. We don't have an attraction and marketing, as many industries do. So there's a huge piece of work to do. It's almost like a secret. There's so many facets to the overarching umbrella statement of supply chain that people can go and get incredibly rewarding and exciting careers. Again, my background pretty well. I've pretty much been to every continent on God's earth in through my work. Nothing to do with leisure. So if people want excitement, travel, interesting times, learning new cultures, challenged environments, what else? You don't. With all due respect to anybody else in any other career, I won't name any others because I don't want to fall out with anybody. There are many careers where you just don't do that. Yeah. But we're, my view, we're terrible at selling the dream. We're terrible at the attraction. We're terrible at the career path planning, training, giving people a career path to those success. People stumble into managerial positions almost by accident. And then we worry about how do we make them better instead of it being a planned outcome. But as I say, definitely a webinar for another time. I'm going to jump back down off my soapbox and let you wrap us up.
Agreed. Ian, have you got any comments on that one at all, just around getting people into the industry?
I think we've got to be patient. I absolutely agree with you, Sean, but I think the next generation, you'll see a difference, because one thing that's not changed in life, I wanted to be what my dad did, and children still do. Yeah, so both my children are in logistics. So if that's a pointer, going forward. But I absolutely agree with Sean, though. We don't. I can't believe we've not changed how we teach people at school. That my kids left school and they didn't know what tax was, and they didn't know how to read a wage slip, and they didn't know how things get from A to B. And I think we should adapt our schooling nowadays to the modern day world. And if we did that, there's absolutely no doubt that logistics and supply chain would be included in it.
No, agreed. Well, that's it, gents. Unfortunately, we are out of time, and it's been great to whistle stop through peak, pandemic, future, and more, the future of the industry, which again, I think that's I know the marketing guys from our side are on the call, so I know they've been listening to get some ideas about other things we can do, and that talent one, and that bringing people into logistics is something we can do quite a bit around. But I'd like to thank Ian. Thank you very much for giving up an hour of your time to join us. We much appreciate that. Sean, thank you as always for joining us on these things, and yeah, thanks for the people that have logged on, and we'll obviously be putting this out there as content and all that. And if you've got any questions, reach out to myself on LinkedIn or Tim or whoever, and we can get the questions answered. And yeah, we really appreciate it. There was actually one question on here that we didn't get to cover, but we'll try and get an answer back by the end of the day to you. I'll share it with the guys and they can give you your thoughts. But yeah, thanks again, everyone, and have a good afternoon and a good Christmas if I don't see you beforehand.
Thanks, everybody.
See you all.
So enjoyed it.
Bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.